QuitSmokingWeed.com, the podcast on Spotify.
Most people who smoke daily are not thinking about their brain chemistry. You are mostly just focused on the evening routine or taking the edge off after a long day or figuring out what you are going to do later. The changes in your brain happen so slowly that they completely bypass your daily awareness. You really only notice them when you stop and the baseline finally shifts.
The slow drift from your original baseline is, well, it is the unspoken reality of daily use.
Yeah.
We are looking directly at the biology of why things feel off, and we are doing this without sugarcoating the mechanics of what happens when you introduce a chronic stimulus to a delicate biological system. Daily users often feel a lingering flatness or a subtle fog. They kind of assume their personality has simply changed. But the reality is heavily grounded in neuroadaptation.
We are going to explore what regular cannabis use actually does to the brain across 4 specific areas. We are looking at the endocannabinoid system, dopamine, memory, and the prefrontal cortex. The crucial, often missed reality we need to establish right away is that almost all of this is reversible. People get caught in the trap of thinking they have permanently altered their brain chemistry.
It is a common fear, but the physical structure of the brain allows for a very clear path back to baseline. To understand why you feel off, you have to understand the specific biological system being hijacked. Your body has this master regulatory network called the endocannabinoid system. It manages mood, appetite, sleep, memory formation, and how you process stress.
So your body is constantly producing its own natural cannabinoids, right?
Yeah.
These are subtle chemical messengers designed to keep all your various biological systems in a state of balance.
Yes, and the biological term for this balance is homeostasis. The natural system is designed for subtle, momentary adjustments to maintain that balance.
Then you introduce THC. The THC molecule is shaped so similarly to your body's natural cannabinoids that it fits directly into the body's CB1 receptors. These receptors are spread densely throughout the brain. But the issue is that THC activates them much harder and for much longer than the body's natural chemicals ever could.
It is a massive influx. THC comes in like a floodlight and keeps the system fully illuminated. And the brain is constantly seeking that baseline balance. So when the CB1 receptors are continually overstimulated by heavy THC exposure, the brain adapts to protect itself from the overwhelming signal. It actively decreases the density of those receptors.
It just shuts them down.
The cell literally pulls the receptors back from the surface, so the THC cannot bind to them as easily. This biological retreat is a process called downregulation. Downregulation is the literal physical definition of tolerance, and it is a core mechanism of dependence.
I look at this process like wearing earplugs at a really loud concert. You put the earplugs in to protect your ears from the overwhelming noise of the speakers. Your body is doing the same thing by pulling those CB1 receptors away from the flood of THC. But when you leave the concert venue and walk out onto a normal, quiet street, you cannot hear a normal conversation. Your ears are still expecting that massive volume, and the earplugs are blocking out normal sound.
That is a very accurate way to look at it. When someone quits smoking, their brain is still wearing the earplugs. The system is muted temporarily. The brain recognizes the sudden lack of input when you stop introducing THC.
Does this mean the brain's receptor system is permanently muted?
No, not at all. Because the endocannabinoid system is fundamentally designed to seek balance, it initiates a process of upregulation. The cells slowly begin to push those CB1 receptors back to the surface. They are trying to catch the natural, lower volume signals from your body's own endogenous cannabinoids again. The receptors are not permanently destroyed. They are just temporarily hiding to protect the neural circuitry.
That receptor downregulation does not happen in a vacuum, though. It heavily influences the brain's reward center. This connection directly explains the emotional flatness that daily users report when they are not actively high. We're talking about a specific area called the nucleus accumbens.
The nucleus accumbens is basically the motivation engine of the brain. It evaluates the effort required for a task and the potential reward you will get from completing it. THC indirectly boosts dopamine release in this reward center. That massive artificial dopamine spike is why smoking feels rewarding in the first place.
But over time, with daily use, the reward system recalibrates its baseline.
It becomes less sensitive to the THC. That is why a daily user needs to consume higher quantities or switch to concentrates just to feel the same initial effect.
And the critical part is that the brain also becomes less sensitive to natural rewards. The dopamine system gets so used to the massive spike from THC that ordinary life events no longer register. Things like eating a good meal, exercising, connecting with a friend, or achieving a goal at work simply do not produce enough dopamine to clear this new hurdle.
Normal life events cannot clear that artificially high threshold. The dopamine system is running at a lowered capacity because it has been overstimulated for months or years.
When life feels flat, boring, or unrewarding without weed, it is not a personality change. It is neurobiological calibration.
The effort required to cook a meal or reply to a text message suddenly feels insurmountable. The nucleus accumbens is not providing the dopamine needed to initiate the action. You are lacking the chemical momentum required to participate in normal life.
I will push back on this point a bit. Many people start smoking heavily because they already feel flat, depressed, or unmotivated. They use cannabis to cope with a world that already feels gray. Are we sure the cannabis is causing this emotional flatness, or is it just revealing a pre-existing condition the user is trying to self-medicate?
The neurobiology shows a specific feedback loop that contradicts the self-medication theory for long-term daily users. Chronic overstimulation from THC forces the brain to turn down its own dopamine sensitivity regardless of the starting point.
So even if someone felt low initially, the daily use is actively creating a new deficit.
It manufactures the very emotional flatness the user is trying to escape by lowering the baseline calibration of the entire reward system. The initial relief people feel when they start smoking is real, but the long-term biological cost is a blunted reward system.
The tool someone uses to find joy ends up raising the threshold for experiencing any joy at all. The user is left in a state where only the substance can help them reach a normal baseline.
You end up needing the substance just to feel a normal level of baseline motivation, while everything else in your life pales in comparison. The brain is highly efficient. It stops producing its own robust reward responses because it expects the THC to do the heavy lifting.
So the reward system's blunting explains the emotional flatness. But the cognitive fog originates in a different region entirely. If you feel like your memory is slipping or your thoughts are constantly clouded, you are dealing with the hippocampus.
This area is packed with an extremely high density of CB1 receptors. The hippocampus is the routing center for memory formation and learning. It acts as the staging ground where the brain converts short-term experiences into long-term memories.
When THC floods the CB1 receptors in the hippocampus, it severely impairs working memory and the encoding of new information. The brain physically struggles to transfer information from the short-term holding area into permanent storage.
The connection between neurons is temporarily disrupted.
I remember the specific, infuriating feeling of losing a thought right in the middle of speaking a sentence. You just sit there, totally blank, hoping the person you were talking to will remind you what you were saying. People experience this constant slipping of short-term memory and start worrying they have done permanent damage. Does this persistent fog point to permanent adult brain damage?
The evidence points to clear reversibility for adult users. We do not see permanent structural brain damage in typical adult daily users. You might see reduced volume or impaired functioning in certain hippocampal regions during active chronic use. However, short-term memory, verbal recall, and the ability to encode new information improve substantially after sustained abstinence.
So you are dealing with temporary chemical interference, not an irreversible doomless.
Exactly. It clears up.
But here's the catch. If your memory is foggy, your motivation is gone, and your emotions feel flat, the logical step is to stop smoking. But quitting requires the exact brain system that cannabis actively suppresses. We have to look at the prefrontal cortex, or PFC.
The PFC handles your high-level executive functions. It is the adult in the room. It manages complex decision-making, long-term planning, emotional regulation, and impulse control. Chronic adult use visibly dampens PFC function.
This is the area of the brain responsible for looking at long-term consequences and moderating your immediate impulsive urges. This is a brutal structural trap for a daily user. The specific neural system meant to weigh the costs and benefits of continuing to smoke is the very system compromised by the smoking.
The biological mechanism for evaluating long-term consequences is effectively running offline.
It is like trying to hit the brakes in a car, where the brake pedal has been worn away by the exact thing you were trying to stop. You recognize you need to stop, but the mechanism for stopping is unresponsive.
When the PFC is dampened by chronic THC exposure, the brain naturally defaults to short-term relief pathways governed by the limbic system. The immediate comfort of smoking easily overrides the logical desire to quit. The hardware required to enforce your logical desire is running on low power, making impulse control incredibly difficult.
When impaired decision-making leads to continued use, it feeds into a secondary side effect. This side effect actively tricks the user into thinking they need more cannabis just to function. Regular use, especially with modern high THC products, heavily increases baseline anxiety.
Chronic exposure dysregulates the entire stress management system. You take a hit, and the immediate dopamine release and CB1 activation provide temporary relief from stress.
The problem occurs as the endocannabinoid system downregulates.
Your baseline capacity to handle normal everyday stressors degrades significantly. A minor inconvenience at work or a simple disagreement suddenly triggers a massive stress response. The endocannabinoid system is not functioning properly to calm the nervous system down.
Every time you smoke, it feels like it reduces the anxiety. The reality is that the chronic use is generating higher anxiety between uses and during any period of abstinence. You think you are a naturally anxious person who needs weed to calm down, but the weed is creating the volatility.
You are creating the anxiety you are then self-medicating. As the THC leaves your system overnight or during the workday, the suppressed endocannabinoid system cannot manage normal cortisol levels. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone.
The resulting tension, irritability, and racing thoughts are actual withdrawal symptoms masquerading as your natural state.
You are treating the withdrawal with more of the substance that caused the withdrawal.
The accumulated effects on the receptors, the dopamine system, the memory centers, and the PFC sound heavy when you lay them all out. But the physical structure of the brain allows for a documented path back to baseline. This path is driven by neuroplasticity.
The brain can physically rewire and repair itself once the chronic disruption stops. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. CB1 receptor density starts recovering within weeks of cessation.
The cells begin pushing those receptors back out to catch your natural cannabinoids.
Memory and verbal recall often improve noticeably by weeks 4 to 8 as the hippocampus clears the chemical interference. Dopamine sensitivity improves significantly over 1 to 3 months as the nucleus accumbens learns to recognize natural rewards again. The brain physically rebuilds the receptors and pathways.
People always want a hard timeline for this process. They want to mark a day on the calendar and know exactly when they will feel perfectly normal. Can someone expect to wake up completely clear-headed on day 30?
There are no fixed clean-by dates. It takes longer for early onset users who started in adolescence or those with very heavy, prolonged use histories.
What is a realistic expectation for someone going through this?
Recovery takes around 7 weeks with proper support, up to about 3 months on your own. Your biology dictates the pace of the upregulation, and it requires sustained patience.
It requires real endurance to outlast the biological recalibration. The trajectory is not a straight line upwards. People often feel great for a few days and then hit a wall of fatigue or apathy.
The hardest stretch is the middle phase, known as the resilience phase. The initial physical withdrawal passes, but rebuilding the dopamine pathways and navigating the emotional flatness requires time and structure.
You might experience waves of cravings or periods where nothing feels particularly interesting.
The brain is doing heavy lifting behind the scenes to restore your baseline, and you have to endure the wait while the physical hardware comes back online.
If you have been chasing that sharp, engaged, and motivated version of yourself for years, you might worry that person is gone forever. But they are still there. The baseline you forgot existed is simply waiting under the surface for your brain chemistry to clear.
The underlying architecture of your brain is waiting to function normally. Once the chemical interference is removed and the resilience phase is navigated, the clarity naturally returns.
The Release, Resilience, and Clarity program gives you the exact structure for this, $20 a month at quit-smoking-weed.com.